Iran is a Persian empire, a Persian country, whether it is Islamic in coloring or Shah in coloring, still Persia.
But it's almost a dream scenario for Israel because they're hitting their biggest enemy. And then in turn, their biggest enemy doesn't hit their biggest enemy, but hits competitor states.
I think we are looking at 3 wars, not just 1 war, 3 wars. The response of the Turks, whereas we can walk into Israel through Syria and can take over Israel if we want to.
The global economy takes a tank, but the industries of these 6 Gulf states and Iran will take a much bigger blow.
The ultimate beneficiary of this war with Iran is China. Iran is double the size of Iraq, if you will. The terrain is different. The endurance of people is different. Look, the West never cared about brown people, whether they are burned into hell or whatever. It doesn't matter.
When you are in empire war, you could also take an injury. But if I completely decimate you and I just lose my hand, it's okay.
Israel is back to square one as the enemy of the Arabs.
This is exactly the questions I'm asking you, Ben.
Yeah, we'd like to start with that.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. This is exactly what I was going to ask you. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, like, there
what's
are
happening?
3 wars.
Okay,
that's
yeah.
my opening
this is
line.
why I saw your thing and I was like, we actually aligned in our questions.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Okay, I'm clapping, Yaman. 1, 2, 3. Hi, good day. Welcome to another episode of Unapologetic. I'm your host, Ashfaq Kareem, and with me today in studio is Mamoun Fandy. Mamoun, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Mamoun, you are a former professor of politics at Georgetown University, you're also president of the Global Strategy Institute here in London. You're joining me today. I think it's day 4 since Trump's 10-day deadline, or day 4 since his 10-day deadline to Iran. What happened was he threatened to blow up all their power plant stations. Iran obviously threatened back, and now they're in negotiations. It's almost a month into this war. More significantly, it's almost 2.5 years since October 7th, which I think is related to this war. We've been chatting a bit in the studio before the camera started rolling about what this war's about, what's going on, what's the war about, and what's going on.
I think we are looking at 3 wars, not just 1 war, 3 wars. There is Trump's war to change the regime in Iran or change its behavior. There is Netanyahu's war that wants to reshape the whole Middle East itself, thinking of himself as Churchill and big leaders of history. And then you have Iran's war, which is an economic war. Basically choke the world economy from Bab el-Mandeb in the southern part of the Red Sea to the Strait of Hormuz, to control the energy and chemicals and everything that and fertilizers that goes into the world economy, about 30% to 40%. And that will make the US cave in and give Iran the concessions that it wants. So we have to talk about these wars separately and which one is winnable and what are the ramifications of each for regional players.
Okay, I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about them separately, but they're also kind of all happening at the same time,
That's
right?
true.
And so I think
That's
before
true.
we get there, maybe an interesting question is how, because you see the media and people looking at this are kind of looking like Netanyahu has drawn the US into this. I don't think they're entirely incorrect, but I don't think the US are also that naive that they're just gone drawn into this, right? And I do think there's a difference between the Pentagon's grand strategy for the region, which is very different to changing, heads of Department of State or changing presidents and where they want to go. And so as we get there, I do agree, and I think most people looking at this think Netanyahu just wants chaos in the region, and they want to, you can see this with what they're doing in Lebanon and also in Iran. But why is it, and how is it, and what do you think is the interplay that where Netanyahu was actually able to draw the US into this war? And which parts of the US state do you think are happy with that? And which parts of the US state do you think are being like, oh no, this is not a good idea?
Well, Netanyahu has always been able to draw US into Israeli wars into the region. I mean, if you follow Netanyahu since the 80s, Netanyahu always, with his MIT degree, with his New York upbringing and all of that, with his American accent, it was able to address Congress, address media in a very eloquent way, telling them, look, this is the boogeyman of the Middle East. Started with Saddam Hussein. If Saddam Hussein was destroyed, then the Middle East would become an amazing place. And then the US went 2003, destroyed Iraq. And then 20 years down the road, we see what Iraq looks like and what the region looks like. He didn't finish at that. He told them, no, there's still another boogeyman in the Middle East that's called Gaddafi. And if we destroy Gaddafi, then you can see it on the record if you do the interviews. This is the evil of the Middle East. If we destroy Gaddafi, the Middle East will look great. Gaddafi was destroyed by America and NATO and all of that. And the Middle East is still a parking lot or a mess, if you will. So there is a constituency for Netanyahu in the United States. There is the AIPAC lobby, very strong lobby. I taught at Georgetown. I was living in Washington. I watched this day in, day out. But these people have a lot of money. They spend a lot of money. They hold Congress by the throat. And they make and break in Washington. And people are scared, for their seats, whether in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. So there is a constituency in terms of the political class in Washington that support Israel, all right or wrong. There's also the left, if you will, that's very skeptical. And this was also amplified by the war of genocide in Gaza. The landscape has changed in the United States. I was there a couple months ago.
In Gaza?
In the United States.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So you see that the landscape has changed. The political tectonic shifts are happening. People cannot stomach this. Watching genocide live, watching all these horrible pictures. So the idea that following Israel, right or wrong, is no longer. You see it, even people on the right. You see the voices of people like Tucker Carlson. You see even serious academics, John Mearsheimer, Steve Wald, others, one from University of Chicago, one from Harvard, top theorist of international politics, telling you this is not the United States war. It's a war of choice. It's an optional war. There is no threat to the United States. It's Netanyahu's war. So the debate is getting stronger. If you followed the last week demonstrations all over the country in the United States, you see how many people are reminiscent of the Vietnam demonstrations, are against the war. So there's something happening that's Israel is no longer leading U.S. politics as it's used to.
Okay, so you say there's three wars. You say there's Trump's war to kind of topple the regime and change things in Iran. There's Netanyahu's war to bring destruction to Iran and possibly the region. And Iran's, I would say it's defensive war, maybe, to kind of, their resistance to this is by choking the world economy because they don't have the ability. I guess they do have the ability to strike Israel quite a lot, as we've seen, but Israel's retaliation to that could be extremely devastating. So the smarter way they're going about it is to try to choke the world economy. Let's start with that. Let's start with their choking of the world economy and lashing out against the US bases in the region and strategic assets of countries that are formally allied to the USA, right? So the Gulf states. How do you think that's going, and for how long can that strategy win out? And that obviously depends on what the Americans and the Israelis do. So just how do you see, what's your thoughts on that strategy?
Well, I think when I describe like three wars, Trump's war against Iran, Netanyahu's war to change the region, and Iran's war for choking the world economy, there's ironically, there's some agreement between Netanyahu and Iran on the duration of the war, both of them playing for time. Netanyahu wants a longer war because his survival, his political survival in Israel depends on these unending wars. Otherwise, he will be on trial, he will be kicked out, and so on and so forth. The Iranians also playing for time, that the more time they have, and they're good at this. I mean, we saw it in the Iran-Iraq war of the 80s. They fought 8 years without flinching. They paid a very heavy price, but they can stomach a long-term war. Can the world economy stomach this war? Choking of the Strait of Hormuz or Bab el-Mandab in the Red Sea, and there they have the Houthis of Yemen who can control that. So can the world economy afford this, and can it recover from it? I mean, the bellicose people will tell you, when the regime changes, everything will open. But even if this war stops tomorrow, it's still the devastating effect on the world economy will take about 2 to 3 years to recover from this war. That's if it happened tomorrow. And I don't see it happening tomorrow. This is a longer war. You have also small states in the Gulf that are taken hostage in this war. They do not want this war. They know that Iran is their neighbor, will always be there. There's a geography at stake. Iran is not going to drown in the sea. Iran, no matter what, Iran will be Iran. And there is trivial discussions of Iran, sometimes you hear it, about if you change the regime tomorrow, then we have a very peaceful Iran and peaceful with its neighbors. Iran is a Persian empire, a Persian country, whether it is Islamic in coloring or Shah in coloring, still Persia, still the Persian nationalism that's driving Iranians in terms of who they are in relation to their neighbors, how they identify themselves. Are they the dominant force? Are they secondary in the region, and so on? So whatever Iran that will come, its relationship with the Gulf will depend on the outcome of this war. And I think people need to think of what kind of Iran will come out. And both scenarios are really dangerous. Suppose Iran is totally defeated. A disintegrated Iran is disastrous for the small Gulf states. I would exclude Saudi Arabia a little bit because it's a bigger state. Small Gulf state, yeah. But small Gulf states, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait, these can pay a very heavy price for a disintegrated Iran. It doesn't take much more than 2-3 bombs every month to make them lose entire security. Yeah, entire security, to make the young ladies who say, I'm traveling to Dubai tomorrow, think twice. Dubai is no longer the bubble, the thing, the in thing for the young and for the youth. People will think a lot about that. Same for Kuwait, the same for Qatar, etc. So the idea of perception of security of these states will not be seen globally the same way, let alone, we talked about the young who would travel to this region, but little known of the Western economic investments that are flying out of these areas. I think the FT was saying there are people leaving Dubai at the price of $150,000 for family or something, to be taken out and helped either by private jets or 4-wheel drives across the border to Saudi Arabia and so on. So there's a money flight, a people flight. All of that is very dangerous and will have huge ramifications for the economy of the small states of the Gulf. Okay. Now, I was having dinner with a few journalist friends and on Friday evening, and we just were talking, and this almost seems like a dream scenario for Israel, who is trying to flex itself and ensure that there is no competitor to it in the region. They go and I think on Friday night they struck steel power plants in Iran. And Iran's retaliation, the expected retaliation is that they're going to strike something in Qatar or the UAE or Saudi Arabia, etc. And so it's like they poke the bear they want, and it's devastating. Destroying the steel infrastructure is massive, and I'm not sure to the extent it was destroyed, but it can be destroyed even further. And then in return, they have these rising Gulf states. The UAE has been friendly to Israel
formally, the others also have been, but not really. I mean, if you think of Qatar, for example, with Al Jazeera, and I mean, I'm sure Israel has, it's hosting Hamas in peace negotiations, etc. I'm sure Israel has a lot of beef with Qatar. It wouldn't want to see a strong Kuwait. It doesn't want to see a more strong Saudi Arabia. It doesn't want to see a more strong Oman. And so I understand Iran's strategy in terms of this is how we can retaliate. This is how we can bring pressure to the USA and to friends of the USA in Europe, elsewhere, to say, hey, you need to stop this. But it's almost a dream scenario for Israel because they're hitting their biggest enemy. And then in turn, their biggest enemy doesn't hit their biggest enemy, but hits competitor states. And it's bringing all of these states down. And so, again, even if the Bab al-Mandeb is closed, Iran activates the Houthis to does that, and the Hormuz, the global economy takes a tank, but the industries of these 6 Gulf states and Iran will take a much bigger blow.
That's true.
Right? So, I mean, this is it's bad news.
Yeah, well, the one thing you say, it's a dream scenario for Israel, but really people don't see the contradiction in these kinds of statements. One, Trump and Israel talking about the Abrahamic Accords and peace in the region, and they want Israel to be integrated in the region. What I see as an analyst is that Israel is back to square one as the enemy of the Arabs, even in countries that signed peace treaties like Egypt, Jordan, and even, I would argue, even within the Emirates, like whether it is Bahrain or the UAE or whatever, that Israel now full square within the category of the enemy of the Arabs. So the idea that you're making peace is an imaginary, this is a hallucination, this is a pipe dream. These people see Israel as the ultimate enemy of the Arabs in this part of the world. I think if you go on social media or on television supporting Israel or even the Abrahamic Accords today, you will be lynched publicly in social media that this is not the time. This is a country that's violating international law, just committed a genocide in Gaza, just attacking Lebanon and other neighboring states, just attacking Iran, all aggressive moves. Who wants to be subservient to that system? So the idea of peace in the Middle East, as Netanyahu described it, peace through force, I don't think neither the Arabs nor the Persians are willing to take it. Even the closest allies of Trump cannot stomach that, and they cannot sell it to their own people. There's also a notion that the Middle East has no public opinion. These states run by dictators, no matter what they sign will go. That's not true. These leaders have public opinion. There are red lines that they cannot cross. And if they cross it, they pay a very heavy price. You have to remember Sadat 79, that basically he crossed the threshold of what's acceptable to the Egyptians. Although he won a war, he made a peace treaty, but pushing beyond what the Egyptians can stomach led to his assassination. So there are thresholds for these societies that no matter how strong the leader is, they cannot cross it.
Okay, I see what you're saying, and I mean, I agree with it in terms of the fact that Israel is now isolated itself completely from the Arab world. I think, even those who still have friend relationships, inside, they do not trust Israel at all. They know that it's a big problem. But at the same time, they seem powerless, mainly because Israel still has the backing of the United States. While there is, fracturing behind Israel. So, for example, AIPAC is a lot more exposed now. The right, you have commentators on the right, as you mentioned, who are commenting, openly against Israel. Some of the most articulate criticisms of Israel come from right-wing America. We see increasing opinion polls saying that the young people of America are against Israel, etc. But fundamentally,
even young Jewish people,
100%. Yeah. But I mean, I don't see the U.S. aid to Israel in terms of guns and weapons and defense systems ceasing at any time.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is I don't think that depends on the president or public opinion. I think that depends on the American imperial interest, that comes from the Pentagon. The fact that we need this strong, I was speaking to once Hamid Dabashi, what he called basically a garrison state. We need the strong garrison state in the Middle East, to almost ensure that that region doesn't become, I wouldn't say not stable, but doesn't become powerful. Because if the USA, if the Middle East, if the region becomes more powerful, then it can be a counterweight against the USA. If it allies with China or with Russia or someone else, suddenly the US hegemony is closed. So ideally, the US would want it to be strong and always in the US pocket. But the nature of strong people is they will not necessarily go where they would. So if it's weak and we have, our monarchs or dictators in charge of it, or if it's just weak, then it's not a factor. And this has been the pattern, since oil was discovered and since the end of World War II, that they've tried to control or subjugate the Middle East and extract its oil through dictators, through monarchs, or by being adversarial towards, Saddam, for instance, or Iran, etc.
Yeah.
So how does that cycle break? Because I agree with you that the Arab posturing now against Israel is very strong. And in addition to that, Israel is on much more tentative sort of nerves in terms of public opinion. But at the same time, it's just extracted a genocide. It's bombing Lebanon as more than it has since 1982, and maybe more since 1982 even. They probably definitely want to create a massive buffer zone in Lebanon. It's probably going to be bigger than the entire size of Gaza. And they are now bombing key infrastructure in Iran willy-nilly. And so I definitely, this is not sustainable, but how much hurt is going to occur? Because you see, I think from Israel's perspective, and maybe from the Pentagon's perspective, you're right. Right now, the Gulf states are very upset that Iran are bombing them. And Iran's actually being very disciplined in terms of bombing them. It's very targeted strikes. It's not indiscriminate, it's discriminate.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Israel's tactic is to drive Iran to the point where those attacks become more indiscriminate. And then the Gulf states are drawn into it. And then suddenly, if these guys go to war, Israel may not be their number one enemy anymore. They may actually find each other to be their number one enemy if they end up in a hot war.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought in at least the global dimension to this, so we do not become obsessed with the Middle East region. There is China, there is Russia in this whole thing. And I think the United States, if you are in the Pentagon or if you are in the State Department, you have to think globally that basically how Russia and China stand to gain from this war, win or lose. And I would probably put all my money on the following.
All your money.
All my money. 2003. The Americans attacked Iraq with the idea of changing Iraq, but handed Iraq completely to the Iranians.
Iran, yeah.
So Iran ended up being the ultimate beneficiary of that war, where Americans lost money and lives and blood in that war. I would say the ultimate beneficiary of this war with Iran is China. And you can add Russia as well. That these are the ultimate, that they will hand the Middle East to China rather than to America. America now, to the Europeans and to South Asians, the Japanese, and to the Korean, is not the reliable America that they used to think of. When you move the THAAD and all the batteries from Asia and send it to the Middle East now, that was very obvious in the visit of the Prime Minister of Japan to Washington 2 weeks ago, or maybe 10 days ago. The Japanese were very, very nervous. I have a friend who was visiting Japan at the time while she was in Washington, talked to the State Department, the Defense Departments, and all of that. These people are very nervous, and they started thinking we have to arm ourselves. That a nuclear Japan or something like that is not a fantasy anymore. That these countries want to rely on themselves and their defenses. The same, you can see that in Europe. Brussels was not consulted on this war. The British, who sent 45,000 troops in 2003 to the war in Iraq, are now very reluctant and openly, Keir Starmer saying, this is not our war, and we have no horse in that race, you know. So there is a global big picture that one has to take into account, and where Israel fits within that, you know. Yes, there is an obsession with Israel in Washington, but there's also Israel fatigue in Washington. Israel's insatiable desire for security is nobody that can fulfill that desire, America or otherwise. In Arabic, we have a saying that says, that if you basically bitten by the soup, you blow into yogurt, you know? And Israel, since the Holocaust, I mean, the Jewish psyche has been everything and anything wants to disseminate and obliterate and destroy us. So a rocket in Lebanon, a rocket in Egypt, everything is a threat, you know. And this insatiable desire, you know, you have to go into a security, a therapy on a couch to sit down and admit that your neighbors are okay. They can live with you and you can live with them. But the idea that you're always on edge, that everybody wants to throw you into the sea, this is an insecurity that neither the United States or the whole world can satisfy. It's an internal Israeli problem, has to be solved internally. These people have to be normal. They have to have their own clear borders. It's not going into Lebanon, taking the West Bank, destroying Gaza. I mean, when you look at these strategies before 2003, before the genocide, you can see there's the Gaza envelope they had. Now they are taking the Gaza envelope to a regional envelope. It's not just our threat is not from Gaza, it's from Iran, it's from Libya, it's from Pakistan. You hear Israeli talking of after Iran will go into Turkey. I see an AI video that was released by Israelis basically putting all these leaders who were killed, and the last one standing was Erdogan. And the response of the Turks was, we can walk into Israel through Syria and can take over Israel if we want to. So these are really like high-stake issues. And Ashfaq, there are things in war as the ultimate war theorist, Clausewitz, said, you know, basically war is politics by other means. Somebody has to impose their will, has to impose their politics on the region. Politics is always local. Iran is going nowhere. America cannot save Israel. America cannot impose its will forever on the Gulf region or on the Middle East. This will always be local issues. Empires came and went throughout the Middle East, from the Roman Empire still today. And still people are surviving. Yes, they're muddling through, they have their own problems and so on. But people left Britain 1956, wanted to change Nasser's regime. Yeah, they went into Suez with Israel, with France. And then the Americans came in on the side of Egypt at the time. And the war stopped, stayed 6 years or so in Aden. Yes. And then the empire basically collapsed. That's, I think, what's happening to America today. Probably the Strait of Hormuz is the Suez of Trump.
Okay, I want to come back to what you're saying. Actually, let's deal with this first, because I want to start talking about what happens if they don't reach a deal by April 6th, Trump's deadline, and what do you think will occur, which I think is likely because I don't see the Iranians. But before we go there, in the Suez metaphor, and I've heard it a few times, so the dying empire is the British and French empires, and the rising empire is the US empire, and the US swoops in, right? in this case, who is the US in this metaphor? Because if the US is
China.
but I mean,
China
but
is the rising empire.
it's true, but will China intervene like the US did? Because the
No.
US intervened in Suez on the side of the Arab world, right? On the side of Egypt. So now, will China intervene in Hormuz on the side? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, you can say Chinese have a different style. One,
100%.
Chinese wants to maintain credibility as a status quo power in terms of its global posture. Chinese want the world to take them seriously, that they are the ones about international law, about law and order,
About business and trade,
stability
yes.
and business and trade. And the Americans are the rogue state. The Americans are the ones who are the big elephant in the room that's destroying everything.
So what would a Chinese intervention in Hormuz look like, the Chinese style?
Well, I mean, we see Chinese style in terms of helping Iranians technically. I mean, in the 12-day war, Iran did not have the same precision in terms of targeting, very specific target in Israel. Now it looks like they are being held by a system outside the US, GPS system, to actually guide their missiles to strike precisely into chemical factories and into Tel Aviv, into Haifa, etc. So I think the Chinese are involved with some degree of deniability. I mean, 1 degree of separation, if you will. But definitely they look like they are helping or making sure that Iran would not collapse on the terms of the United States and Israel.
Okay, so now let's move to what maybe I guess is the crux of what's likely to happen in the next month and how that will make the next 6 months look, right? I don't see the Iranians backing down. I don't see Trump surrendering as well, mainly because he's an egomaniac, mainly because I think the world economy can probably sustain a bit more. Oil is been manageable so far, the price, mainly because he's allowed Russia, his arch enemy of the USA, to actually sell oil, which I think there's a lesson in that. The fact that they could now allow Putin to sell oil just so that they can stabilize the price just makes you think.
They let Putin sell oil, they let Iran sell
exactly.
oil.
No, that's true.
Because
the
world economy cannot afford that.
But what do you think happens? There's talk about there's U.S. troops moving to the region. There's speculation whether that will be Karg Island, whether that would be various coastal areas in Iran, whether it be something more substantial. Israel are always there to carry out strikes, rogue or may not be rogue, maybe in conjunction with the Pentagon's knowledge. What's going to happen? What do you think the next month looks like, and what does that mean for the next 6 months?
The old Napoleon saying, if you see your enemy make a mistake, don't interrupt them. If the Americans land on Karg Island with their, 30,000 lightly armed troops, special or whatever, they think it is Venezuela. Remember, first liberation of Kuwait was almost 900,000 troops who were on the borders of Kuwait. The Iraq war was 350. Britain contributed 45, US contributed 250,000, and other countries contributed the rest. What is 30,000 that are not mechanized, that are not? You want to win Iran from the war, from the air, it's impossible. You want to collect those uraniums. Iran is double the size of Iraq, if you will. The terrain is different. The endurance of people is different. The culture is different. I don't think there's a good understanding of Iran. There's kind of either people buying the line of the Shah's son supporters that changed the regime, or people having secondhand information about that society. Very few speak Farsi and know that society well. Iran is an old culture and a serious country, will always be there. I'm not a big fan of their regime, but that's their choice. Who am I to tell them how they govern themselves? The idea that you are driven by social media, by Netanyahu's sound bites and so on. Let's reshape the Middle East. This is not real. And there are contradicting projects in the Middle East that structurally problematic. You have a country like Saudi Arabia that's really building itself and think this whole war is directed against their trajectory forward. That they want to put them down. They want to drag them in. It's a trap to undermine the Vision 2030. It's a trap for them as a rising power. So there they have different kind of thinking about it, and they're very reluctant to get involved because they think they have a baby to protect, and they think they see their future, that they're going to be a great state one day. And you can see it in the people. If you walk in the streets of Riyadh, they're really proud of themselves. They want to build a serious nation state that's competing. They think that if they fall into this trap, this whole Vision 2030 and all this dream will go down that way. And this is why they're very careful to just be extremely careful in dealing with the United States. They don't want to appear on the side of Israel. Other Gulf states feel the same way. Egypt. If you see Egypt, Pakistan, Turkey, whatever, they're meeting in Islamabad.
Yeah.
These people want to give Trump a face-saving mechanism because there's no way out of this war. Trump cannot win this war. I mean, if you look at the escalation ladder in the terms of John Mersheimer, how far can he go before he hurts himself? How far, if he goes and, let's say, occupy those islands, puts people on the ground, no oil, control the oil or destroy the oil installations, then the world will be against him. The world economy will go into huge recession. He can't win it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It's just unwinnable war. And at the end of the day, he will negotiate on the terms of the Iranians rather than on the terms of the Israelis.
How confident are you of that?
I cannot see any way out unless for Trump to cut his losses and say, I won, it's done. This would have been really fantastic after decapitating the regime the first day and says, I won, and he left. But this picture is no longer there. He dragged it on. And the more you drag it on, the more you are into this muddy water. It's very difficult. Somebody has to provide that face-saving mechanism.
I mean, I think he tried to. I think he tried to get out. And I think the Iranians are not going out because they don't trust that Israel will stop bombing them.
One, they will not. They think they will negotiate and will be bombed again.
Exactly.
And they're bitten twice.
I mean, it's twice recently, but in the history, it's exactly. A lot more. Yeah.
That's one. Second, there are things that the Iranians are making that people don't take account of. Said, we don't want to negotiate with Witkoff and Kushner. Yeah. So they're changing your negotiating team. That's how confident they are. And if they break that family lock on the war, there's the Trump's in-laws and his business partner and so on, if they break that circle and then create a wedge and bring Vance in and so on and so forth, they already think they have enough cards to play. The Americans are running out of cards, except bombing, more bombing. And he said, you told me 2 weeks ago that 95% of the targets were obliterated. You told me that there's no more targets to hit in Iran. So why are you continuing this war? And why you are not winning it? And why Iran is still sending lots and lots of missiles into Israel, and more importantly, to the Gulf states. And the numbers are increasing. I mean, they are not decreasing. If you look at the trend, at first they say that the trend is decreasing, but now we see actually increasing with accuracy. And also proxies are playing again. Hezbollah is involved. The Houthis are involved. The Iraqis are involved. So there are more cards in the hands of Iran than there is in the United States, as far as I'm concerned, or the way I see it.
Okay. What do you think? I mean, you mentioned Iraq, and you've mentioned how Iraq became under the sway of Iran because America basically created a situation in that war with them where they could. How is Iraq being impacted by this war? And I mean, simply because Iran is obviously integrated a lot with the Iraqi economy. Iran's industry has been hit. Iran now is almost activating Iraq in terms of activating its militias and getting it ready in the event that they do. How does this impact Iraq, which has already been devastated by a 20-year war?
Iraq will be actually like torn apart in many ways because the Americans want to use the Iraqis through the Kurds and all of that to do ground operations or to agitate inside Iran and so on. So there is a section of Iraq that's Kurdistan and other parts of Iraq that's pro-American that will be pulled in this direction. And there's the majority Shia population of Iraq that are very much pro-Iranian, and they are not just pro-Iranian because it's a belief. It's a religious creed. It's not geopolitics anymore. I mean, this is the big difference. I mean, in the same way Pete Hegseth is fighting a Crusaders' war, the Iranians also are fighting a war of creed and belief and survival. Iraq will be torn apart, and with that also, you're not having a disintegration of Iran alone, but you have also destabilized Iraq that adds another layer to this destabilizing the Gulf region, to disrupt the oil flow. The probably 30% or so of the oil flow from the region will be affected. And that will have huge ramifications for the population locally and for the world economy globally. I think Iran's still the piece of the puzzle that not many people paying attention to it. That as the war drag on, Iraq will get involved, but in a non-traditional way, non-conventional way. Lots of asymmetric warfares happening against the American bases in Iraq. Also internal strife. The divide between the Kurds and the Sunni and the Shia will return to the fore one more time. So this is really the million-dollar question, and not many people are thinking about it. Unfortunately, it's missing from the calculus of most analysts.
You see, when you say that, there's a few things that come to my mind. So firstly, I want to at some point go through the escalation ladder, right? Like what comes next and what comes next and what comes next. But the other thing is, Iraq has been devastated. It has been putting itself together. It's had a good last 8 or 9 years. I mean, good by relative terms, right? And now, again, if this war escalates, and honestly, even if there's a peace treaty signed tomorrow, I think Israel and certain elements of the Pentagon will continue trying to stoke and look for militia or allies who can start stoking Iran. Like, I don't think that ends. I think because the Iranians obviously have the strategic depth there, they have the relationships, they have that depth to kind of activate. But I'm sure that search for people, bandits they can pay off, who probably won't be loyal to Israel for long, but people who can start stoking fears, that continues. Do you see that kind of fallout happening to Saudi Arabia? Because I mean, the small Gulf states, as you mentioned, are small states. They have an army that America have bases there, and their army in many ways requires American functionality. They don't have, they're not big enough for militias and armed militias to operate and to work, and for populations to kind of split apart. Either people will either stay there and leave, or and if their infrastructure is taken out, the energy infrastructure, and tourism stop, it's kind of game over. Like the entire nations will be sitting ducks. But do you see, if this war continues for long, 2, 3, 4 years, that Saudi Arabia can be plunged into some sort of civil war?
Well, let me try to divide your question into little pieces and see how I can answer it. One, let's agree that winning a battle is not winning a war.
Okay.
That the Americans won all the battles in Vietnam and they lost the war. They won all the battles against Taliban and they lost the war. They won all the battles in Iraq and they lost the war.
But so did the Iraqis.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But the second part, how many failed states in the Middle East can the world afford? I mean, we have a failed state that's likely to happen in Iraq and in Iran. Yes, we have failed state in Libya, semi-failed state in Lebanon, failed state in Syria, Yemen. How can you manage that chaos?
You see, I hear that all the time, but that's much worse for the people in the failed state than it is for the world.
Well, I agree with you. But also there is something at stake as far as the world is concerned. Let's say if that was Taliban, that's okay. That's a failed state in Afghanistan. But this is the hub of global energy. This is a globalized war. It's not oil and gas makes the global war. It's not about the people. Look, the West never cared about brown people, whether they're burned into hell or whatever. It doesn't matter. But cares about a commodity that can devastate the world economy. And Iran, Iraq, and the Gulf states altogether, including Saudi Arabia, this is the world energy market. If this is disrupted for the 2 years you described, I don't know how the West can recover. I can't imagine it. I mean, there are people who studied economic trends who claim that the world never recovered from the boycott of 1973. Oil
embargo, yeah.
So imagine this happening today. This is something that will have huge impact on global economy with ramifications for years to come. Not my generation. I'll be long dead before the economic recovery happens in the West, if that continues the way you're describing.
You see, from a perspective of empire building, now I understand from the perspective of we are one global society and we need to try to have better business and there'll be some losers and winners, that absolutely makes sense. But I don't think I don't think we were ever really in that era. I think we've been in that era since the end of World War II, which is a bit of a fluke in terms of global history. But I mean, like you mentioned Pete Hegseth saying that the Americans are gonna have an empire, which, he didn't say empire, but like from the American sway of interest.
He cut it by
basically, it's basically North America having into Central America and Greenland. And
he did longitude and latitude,
right? And he's clearly, he speaks a lot. He has tattoos of crusader events on his, and he said previously, he said horrible things about Muslims and brown people and Arabs. And so he's clearly thinking about this in civilizational terms.
Yeah.
Netanyahu thinks about this in terms of good and bad and civilizational terms and security. There are elements in Iran that think about that from that perspective also, right? So when you are in empire war, you could also take an injury. But if I completely decimate you and I just lose my hand, it's okay. And I think for too long, we've kind of counted the wars on brown people in the last 40 years in that calculus. It's really, really bad for the people in Afghanistan. Oh, but they kind of won because the Americans retreated. But really, the economy is devastated. The Taliban are still in charge. The Taliban are not a healthy regime for the people. And so what's happened to that human development in Afghanistan, right? While the Americans lost $3 trillion and everything else, and the same with Iraq, and it's going to be the same in Iran. And I don't think you said many analysts aren't thinking about Iraq. I think Netanyahu, as an analyst, is. He's thinking about Iraq. He's thinking it will devastate that. It will devastate half of Iran. If these guys go and blow up, the Qatar gas fields, imagine he can destroy Qatar gas fields by destroying Iranian steel plants or whatever. I mean, this is like a dream scenario for him. And he can, I mean, even the Emiratis, who are, friends of the Israelis and not friends of the other Gulf states at the moment, even if they get weakened, I'm sure Netanyahu doesn't feel hurt, right? So
no, he's not concerned about it.
100%. And Saudi Arabia, who's trying to, as you mentioned, play this very, this game of not getting involved, which I think is smart because they want to look forward and they want to turn a leaf and build a new nation, and they have a plan.
Yeah.
They can be drawn into this, and they're probably hoping and praying, and almost like all these nations have to stop this from plunging further, is hoping that Sir Donald Trump, who is delusional and a megalomaniac and is somehow going to be like, okay, I will accept a peace deal not on my terms. So it seems like a very, very, sorry for being pessimistic, but it just seems like a very tentative thing.
No, but look, Americans and Europeans sometimes get very excited about certain things. I mean, you mentioned the civilizational term that Pete Hegseth talked about. And you remember Samuel Huntington and his Clash of Civilizations. And this is how the world is going to look like. And before him, there was The End of History by Fukuyama. And this is the ultimate victory of the liberal world order. Where is all of this? It was just a moment. It was a soundbite at the end of the day, despite the books sold well. Both books sold very well. But it ended up being a footnote in history. It's not really what the world we live in today. The world we live in today is a world where you have a rising power like China, you have a rising power like Russia that's playing its hands carefully. The United States is losing in Ukraine, definitely losing in Iran, and losing its allies, having a big fight with NATO and all of that. There's a new world emerging, and we have to think about that world. I don't think we should. I think Netanyahu will go down in history as a small footnote. It's nothing that you should worry about, despite the havoc that he wreaked in the Middle East. That the Middle East is able to consume Netanyahu and others. The stomach of the Middle East can turn Netanyahu around. He can go into a quagmire in Lebanon. They stayed in Lebanon before and they withdrew under pressure from a very small, weak state because of small resistance that was created in 82 called Hezbollah and continued until today. I think the idea that Israel's surviving on little chunks of time breaks, I'm going to just destroy Hamas to live for 10 more years. I'm going to destroy Hezbollah to live for another 10. There's no strategic vision in Israel. There is, in the West, there is a sense of Israel as the coming superpower of the Middle East. Israel, if you look at Israel in actual indicators, without American technology, without American airplanes, without THAAD, without the dome and the sling of David, and without the protection in the UN, Israel looks like Yemen at the end of the day. It's another Middle Eastern state. If you remove all this aid and that all of hell, they're not different from any other Middle Eastern state. And if you cut the metaphor here, and you see the metaphor probably, the Iranians now are targeting these airplanes that supply other airplanes by fuel in the air, yeah? And if you cut that umbilical cord, metaphorically, between America and Israel, Israel is just another failed state in the Middle East. Forget about this whole Silicon Valley of Haifa and so on and so forth. There's nothing there. Just bunch of settlers, hooligans coming from all over the world, trying to grab other people's lands with guns that they don't produce. You know, they produce the Uzis, but I think we have to put Israel in its exact place in terms of nation building from 48 till today. It's not terribly successful. It's a garrison state, as you described it. It's all about land grab. They don't talk to the people of the region. They talk to the American media and try to convince Americans to continue this pipeline of support forever. That's endless. I mean, who financed the genocide in Gaza and who's more implicated? I think the Americans are more implicated than the Israelis. The Israelis did not produce the 2 tons bombs and the 1 ton bomb. These are all produced in the United States. The delivery system of these bombs, the F-15, F-16, the F-35, all of this is made in the United States and given for free to Israel. So, I mean, people in the region, or at least I would say sane people in the region, see Israel for what it is. Israel is not a lasting project the way it's going. Israel is into self-destruct. Just give them enough rope and they will hang themselves.
You mentioned the escalation ladder, and we want to return to this. What does the escalation ladder look like? So, I mean, where we at the moment now where there's a peace negotiation on the table, which I'm not optimistic about. Yeah. I think no one is. And I think even if a negotiation is signed, I think the Iranians won't do it. But if they did, Trump would still try to kind of do something and maybe try to seize Kirk Island or do something of a strike. So where are we in the escalation ladder? We're probably going to soon see some sort of land grab by the Americans in terms of boots on the ground. Yeah. What happens after that?
I think the land grab might not be sustainable, and the land grab will end up being the tipping point of this war, because you can imagine a scenario where American troops are ambushed on Kirk Island or even on Abu Musa, yeah, or a Tumb or whatever, and then you get some body bags going back to the United States. Then Trump will not look very good. He will lose the second term, the midterm elections. Yeah. He will lose it, not just the House, but also the Senate. And then he will be on trial, both him and Kushner and everybody else. You know, just interrogation after money, corruption, everything else. I think if he loses the Senate, then we're going to have something like the Iran-Contra affair, if you remember, Oliver North, and dragging long months of testimony in Congress and so on. We'll have a great theater to watch.
Okay, so you think this ends before midterm elections?
It has to end before midterm elections, but as you talk about escalation ladder, let's imagine a worst-case scenario that Trump goes crazy as he is, and says, okay, let's do a Hiroshima, Nagasaki on Iran. What difference does that make?
I mean, it makes a big difference to the people who get vaporized.
Yes, to make a huge difference for people who get killed. But this is not a small country. This is not Japan, who thinks that to save my own people, I have to raise the white flag and surrender. No, this is an Islamic republic.
No, I mean, a nuclear bomb would embolden them more, yeah.
That's made of serious, genuine belief that even if you don't like it, don't underestimate it. It's serious belief. They will fight to the last man. So it's not going to be the decisive moment of the war that you throw a couple bombs in Iran. And this is where I tell you, there's a difference between escalation ladder, as Mersheimer puts it, an escalation dominus. Who dominates the escalation? Who's making this work the way they want? Who will establish his will on the ground? I think so far the Iranians are holding the tempo of this war. They are the ones who are poking the Israelis. They are the ones who are wreaking havoc in the Gulf. And they are controlling the tempo. And they have the sense of time. Because this is a war of attrition. Who will get exhausted first? And as I told you, I put my money that Trump will get exhausted first. That he will negotiate on the terms of the Iranians. He will make concessions to the liberation. He made concessions on their oil. He already made concessions on their oil and let them sell. And probably, sadly, that as the Americans and the Iranians sit on the negotiating table, the package that they will negotiate is the small Gulf states. They will not be having a seat on the table. They will be on the menu.
What do you think? How do you think they will be impacted by that negotiation?
They don't have a lot of leverage.
Yeah, they have zero leverage, yeah.
To affect the outcome of the negotiation. And when I say small Gulf states, I leave Saudi Arabia aside because it's a different ball game. But these are the ultimate victim of this war. That they cannot declare war on Iran. They will not make a difference with all their forces, even if they join in. They're just paying the heavy price. And maybe also the Americans will ask them to pay even more in the future. I mean, given the extortion system of Trump that we watch.
So assuming that some negotiation occurs, and as you mentioned, they are going to be sort of the victims of a negotiation, what's the implications? What do you think happens to them? Do you think they just, are they going to...
I think I can imagine 2-3 scenarios. I think the Gulf states will come out of this war rethinking their security, rethinking their alliances.
But would they be allowed to? What I'm saying is, I get that they will, but would they have the leverage to be able to be like, oh, we're going to start not looking towards America, because America, price will want a price. Trump will want a price, as you mentioned, and the price isn't just give us money. The price is
not only that, but also the bases.
Yes, the bases.
The bases that's supposed to protect you in Qatar, in Kuwait, and whatever. It was a liability, not an asset.
No, so I agree with you there, but like you mentioning, and I agree with you, they're not going to have much leverage. So they're not going to be able to be like, get your bases out of here. They're going to have to just be like, okay, now what?
They have to talk to the Iranians themselves. They have to accept the facts of geography. That they have to make a deal with the Iranians.
That their big brother in the neighborhood is Iran.
That's how it is. This is how it will work. It worked during the Shah's time. It works during Islamic Republic's time. It will work the same way. It's a bigger country. There are smaller countries. You can say the technology difference, etc., makes the Gulf states more livable.
But why, the U.S. would never accept that, though. The U.S. would never accept that the Gulf states go into Iran's pocket from a security perspective, and so they are going to be at a fault line.
They will be at the fault line. But they will work with China. They will work with Russia. They will look around. I mean, they have to survive. They have to survive. But definitely what they know now is that the American umbrella did not protect them. And definitely they noticed that the Patriot systems and the THAAD and all of that, when there was a choice between them and Israel, America will
always go
protect Israel. So the security vulnerabilities, lots of rockets land more on Kuwait and on UAE and on Qatar than they are on Israel in actual numbers. So how can I trust you? I mean, that debate will take place. There's another layer of the debate that will take place that's actually more dangerous, which is the infighting within the Gulf states themselves after this war. Maybe it's not infighting, but the clear differences in positions that will create frictions that will have serious ramification to the notion of the GCC, that they were not seeing eye to eye on this.
Where's the friction points? I mean, is it just UAE and everyone else, or is there more substantial friction points?
Definitely UAE and Saudi. And that friction started over Yemen just before this war.
I mean,
and I think
some would argue even Sudan to some extent.
Yeah,
definitely in Yemen,
and this will probably multiply by a factor of 10 after this war, because you cannot take me into that danger zone. You can't take me to the cliff. And it's very dangerous. I have my own vision for my own country. I don't want to be allied with anybody else. I want to have this strategic bubble to live in, to put my house in order and execute my vision 2030 and be a real power. Don't distract me while I'm still building. Don't drag me into this war that's not mine. Qatar is in a bad fix. I mean, Qatar does not want this war. And they made it very clear. And if you hear debates from Qataris themselves on Al Jazeera, like Dr. Al-Misfar and others, saying this is not our war. We shouldn't get involved. We should take the hit and just not be on the side of Israel on this war. This is on Al Jazeera. It's not, the Omani is definitely hands off, and you saw the foreign ministers of Oman's piece in the Economist and his interview on Face the Nation in America, basically saying Iranian gave everything. Netanyahu wanted the war to continue, and Trump followed Netanyahu's lead. That's what happened. So these debates will take place, and Gulf people, especially the Saudis, they're status quo people. They don't like to rock boats, and they don't want to go into wars with their neighbors. Even during the Iran-Iraq war, they were helping Iraq in some ways, but they kept some degree of deniability. We are not into war with Iran ourselves. So there's more sane they're saner as people than people in the United States or Israel.
I mean, we're coming more or less to the end. We've talked a lot about Israel. You mentioned that Israel is, isolated and increasingly isolating themselves, and this idea that Israel will normalize or find peace or willing to, I wouldn't say integrate, but even just live amicably with their neighbors. Israel's longevity before October 7th compared to now. What's your comments on that?
Look, sometimes I have a different kind of reading on October 7th than many people. October 7th was not about politics as much as about policies. I mean, before October 7th, the Israelis choked the Gazans to a degree where people couldn't even live. Their permission to go into Israel and all of that. If you study that part, you realize people in Gaza are being choked completely. And on the other side of Egypt, those tunnels were providing the lifelines for the Gazans to provide gas and oil and food and whatever were completely shut down and destroyed on the Egyptian side. So the relative balance that Egypt was providing for the Gazans was closed off. The Israelis choked them. Sinwar and his people had no choice but to pull this plan from the drawer and say, this is the moment where we have to do something. But I think if the Gazans were not choked by Israeli policies over the years, and if you study the numbers of permissions given to Palestinians to work in Israel, before October 7, he realized that the world has become very dark for them. You have no choice but become suicidal. And by the way, you can take this metaphor to the Iranian situation today.
With the sanctions.
You know, with the sanctions, with everything, I have to become suicidal. I have to do something very drastic for the world to hear me, for the world to hear my case, for my issue or my file to be dusted off from the bottom of the files to be on the top. And the Palestinians did that by October 7th. Everybody started talking about the Palestinian issue after October 7th. And not because of what they did, but because of, as Mahmoud Darwish said it, you know, Palestinians are lucky to have Israel as an enemy, you know, because Israel has all the coverage in the world. Whatever happens in Israel is highly covered by Western media. So people noticed the plight of the Palestinians, not because of the Palestinians,
Because of Israel.
because their enemy is Israel. And that's what people don't pay attention to. When we think of Israel's longevity, I can assure you, and take it from me, before October 7th, before, not the October 7th, I think my demarcation point is the genocide, not October 7th.
Okay.
Before the genocide, there was a probability that Israel could integrate into the region and could have peace. But I think after the genocide, people saw Israel for what it is. It is not there to make peace, it's there to dominate the region. So even with countries like Egypt, Jordan, and UAE, Bahrain, all these states that normalize, Israel was, for them now, the enemy of pre-67. They put themselves back into the box of the enemy of the Arabs as a people. And remember, if the war in Iraq, 2003, as many argue, led to the Arab Spring at the end of the day, you know, this whole sense of defeat and sense of hanging Saddam Hussein and the day of Muslim feast, you know, that sense of humiliation that led to the Arab Spring. What the results of what will happen in Iraq and Iran today will lead to unleash greater forces in the Middle East that have ramifications for years to come. Whether Trump wins or Israel wins, the region will not be the same. And also, take it from me, the regime change that will happen, not in Iran, but in America, the regime change that will happen will be in Israel, not in Iran. The regime change will probably happen in Bahrain or some other place before it happens in Iran. There are historical bigger thrusts that people don't pay attention to. And sometimes there are unintended consequences to things that also people don't notice. Well, these 15 points that Trump puts to the Iranians, which means submission almost. I mean, the Austro-Hungarians put 10 of them to the Serb, 1914. Yeah? And then June 10th, there is a big war happens. So many players could be sucked into the situation of the Middle East, although we say China is careful, Russia is careful. Many players can be sucked into this situation. As Clausewitz calls it, war is a crapshoot. Nobody knows. When it starts, nobody knows who's winner and who is loser. And I think, unfortunately for my own people in the region, they're going to be the ultimate losers, but they have to fight it till the end.
Final question. You mentioned that regime change, and you said, take it from me. Regime change in Bahrain, in the USA, in Israel, way happens sooner than it happens in Iran. Just tell me more behind that thought process.
The thought process is that if you look like a vulnerable state like Bahrain, with the majority Shia population, with a lot of pressure. It can go bust anytime. Without the Saudi support and the Peninsula Shield forces that went in there, the state can be taken over, will not be protected by the THAADs and by the Patriot missiles and so on. It's not enough to protect a country like that. The probability, imagine the Americans fold their tent and say like, okay, the dynamics of America after midterm elections and so on and so forth, say let's reduce our presence in the Middle East. And that debate happened, remember, after the Iraq War.
Yeah.
You know, and America as a balancer or the hegemon in the Middle East started to withdraw. I think that debate will take place. How Iran would treat these small Gulf states with the reduced American power in the region? Treat them as a big brother treating junior partners. And you will have lots of proxy small things. One bomb here, one bomb there. The economy is devastated. I mean, there was a lot of excitement before this war and about investment in AI in the region, and UAE will be number 2 in AI after Americans.
Gone.
All gone. All gone. And to recover it, it will take a long, long time. And this, in my mind, what led Saddam to invade Kuwait and grab it is also the same reasoning that could allow Iran to walk into any of these countries and grab it. I mean, there is nothing that prevents that. There's no force that can prevent that. The Israeli insurance that the Arab states bought will not save them from that. And this is why I say wounded Iran is more dangerous than intact Iran. I look at long term. I look at long trends of history. I'm not into snapshots. I mean, look at Europe. After World War I, what happened? World War II, what happened? You know, these big shifts, this is not a small war. This is not, I would say this is bigger than 2003
Yeah,
Iraq
it's very
war.
big. This is the big war.
This is the big war. And there's one big thing that we haven't talked about. The Iranian capabilities. We haven't talked about the enriched uraniums in Iran and their ability to reach that 60%. And I'm one of those who believe that they can reach even more because of the know-how and the technical abilities and your ability to balance 16 and 32 centrifuges to spin in sync and produce hexafluoride the way you want. This is something that we haven't talked about in this conversation.
We can talk about it.
You cannot remove that know-how from the Iranian brains. You can destroy Fordo, you can destroy Isfahan, and don't go to Bushehr, because otherwise you're going to pollute the whole region and you're going to destroy the water of the Gulf, and desalination plant will not work, and the rest of the Gulf will not have even drinking water to drink. You know, we haven't talked about these nightmare scenarios that are likely to happen. There is underestimation of Iran that's taking place that's extremely dangerous. And people need, in the excitement of this, to rethink twice. The last metaphor I would leave you with is the fog of war. All the thinking of the region and outside it is foggy. I mean, there is no strategic thinking. Trump does not have Colin Powell, when he was a general with George Bush, the father, when he said, I will cut off the Iraqi army on the border of Kuwait and then kill it. There's a general thinking how to execute a war, how to kill another army. I don't see any generals around Trump. I see like a talk show host of Fox News becoming a minister of war now, or war secretary. And the real generals, many of them dissented. And if you remember when General McAllister dissented in Afghanistan, you know, these people know when things are going south and say, I'm no party to it. Pentagon generals are uncomfortable with Pete Hegseth, uncomfortable with Trump. And even CENTCOM, or Central Command, the people who run the Middle East area from Afghanistan to almost Libya, they are uneasy about the kind of tools they were given to conduct this war, the authorization of forces, the lack of vision. Do you want to destroy the infrastructure of Iran? Can you afford that? We can do that if you want, but do you want to do that? Are you aware of the ramification of that? You know, are you aware that Iran also will lash out and destroy other infrastructures, energy infrastructures in the regions, even of countries that are not players in this war, like Saudi Arabia and others? So the lack of thinking, Trump is not a man, or his team, who think through issues, who don't have strategic planning. They just want a media picture. The unfortunate part, neither sending commanders to get you the enriched uranium will give you the picture that you had with Maduro and his wife being dragged. This is Pete Hegseth, his Fox News. He wants a picture for Fox News. There's nothing in this war who will give him that picture. The pictures will come if he lands with his troops, and then you have these body bags, black body bags, going back to America. That's the picture that he will get.
You mentioned we haven't discussed something, so I just want to discuss something with you if you have the time. Yes, on the escalation ladder, how bad can things get? I mean, what sites can Israel or the US hit in Iran so that there can be massive fallout? You mentioned water. And what can Iran hit in the Gulf states or in the Arab world, or even in Israel, which can also create massive fallout?
Well, I said, something like Bushehr, I mean, even the Russians and different nuclear experts, from Dr. Mohammed al-Baradi, who is the director of the IAEA before, and other scientists say this is can create more than Chernobyl in terms of effect.
Radiation,
Yeah, the radiation of the water in the Gulf will destroy this whole desalination plants. Almost all Gulf states depend on it. I mean, they don't have water except through this desalination plants. I mean, these people will die of thirst.
And so this is because the radiation will impact the water in the Persian Gulf, in the Arab Gulf? Okay.
Yes. But also, there's a likelihood, if you hit the infrastructure of Iran, the vital infrastructure,
they'll hit out on the
they hit also
plants.
the desalination plants. They will hit. I mean, imagine one lucky hit of Daimuna in Negev, the nuclear reactor of Israel. Yes, protected as they are, but we've seen lots of loopholes in the Israeli three-layered systems of THAAD and the David Sling and what they call the Iron Dome. We've seen lots of loopholes. Imagine a very lucky hit. I mean, September 11th was a lucky hit for those boys, with take over airplanes and go into this thing. What are the probability of this to repeat itself in history? It's almost nil. But also you can have a lucky hit like that with Dimona and lots of nuclear reactors that are not protected in Israel. And this is a very small state. You're
Yeah, very small
very,
state.
very small state. And you're destroying the Israelis and the Palestinians alike. And it affects Jordan, it affects Egypt, it affects all of that. There are other players that we have to think about in the region in terms of scenarios. I mean, will Egypt continue to be on the sideline?
Do you think it will? If this goes on, if this becomes very bad?
I mean, Egypt is a big question for me because it's a country that can flip. It suffers from serious economic problems.
Yeah.
Now its gas treaty with Israel is almost, I think, it's not working. I mean, Egyptian shops are closing at 9 o'clock now, not instead of Cairo used to be
midnight,
awake until 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. So the stability of Egypt is at stake. Imagine a scenario where you have another general in Egypt that's not General Sisi type or Anwar Sadat type, but a radical general who will say, I'm not having this.
I mean, how would a radical general get in, like raise up to that position though? I mean, wouldn't that be...
System can break. It was broken in 2011.
The system can break, okay.
You know, I mean,
Yeah, fair.
there is no system that's 100% proof. And Egypt is not fully insured against, under certain pressure, a coup could take place, a revolution could take place. Anything can take place. How far is Netanyahu pushing
He's gone beyond
these countries?
Yeah.
You know, and Egyptian generals, how much humiliation can they take from Netanyahu and his government? You know, there's lack of respect. And if you do content analysis of what's written in Egypt, whether pro Sisi or against him, there is a sense of humiliation. There's a sense that Egypt's role in the region is being reduced to a minimum, and we have to reassert this role. How you reassert it? I mean, imagine now the Houthis decide to play their game in the south.
Yeah. And they impact the Suez.
They impact the Suez, and then another revenue is taken away. The Israelis cut off their gas, and you are in darkness, and salaries are not right for... We're talking about 120 million people.
Yeah.
I mean, if this country goes bust, add to Iran, add to Iraq, add to Syria. This is a nightmare scenario in the Middle East.
Okay, I understand. I get it now. So you're saying that when everything gets bad enough, at the end of the day, that then means the biggest loser potentially is Israel.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. But, you know, Netanyahu is in the euphoria of I have enough bomb to throw around.
Yeah.
It's, for him, it's Christmas. It's fireworks. It's not people being killed. So when he realizes, and I think October 7th should have taught him a lesson, that this state is not immune. The small group of people can defeat you militarily. And October 7 was a military defeat on the southern command of Israel. It was not about the people at the party being killed, and it was not about the kibbutz and kibbutzim. It was about Hamas taking over, destroying their internal security. They took their computers, they took their soldiers, everything else. It was a military operation. But it was deflected and reportrayed as attack on civilians. But it was a military operation by a small actor. And these small actors don't disappear. I mean, lots of questions remain with us. Remember, Netanyahu and Trump want to disarm Hamas. When was that?
Years ago.
Yeah. And now they want to disarm Iran. If you cannot disarm Hamas, small player, you want to disarm Iran. How long does it take you? I mean, if you have to be sane, how long does it take you? You wanted to disarm Hezbollah since 1982, and Hezbollah is still throwing rockets at you. You know, so to tell me that this war is going to end very quickly, I mean, you have to be really smoking something illegal to accept these kinds of arguments floating across the media in the West.
Mamoun Fandy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great pleasure.